Hey guys, Cody here. So Emily has started vlogging now every single day as well. And so we're going to have a separate playlist for her vlog and for my vlog, in addition to our playlist for our weekly updates that we do every Friday. So check those out on our channel page and subscribe if you'd like to follow along. So let's get into my day 69 of the Odin Project. Today I spent 4 hours doing the Odin Project. I had some appointments this morning, so I had to cut my time in half. However, I got significant work done with the shopping cart project. So let's jump into what I did today. So yesterday, if we remember from the vlog, I had this shop page that was loading these product cards, and they have these incrementers that I was working on to increment both the product quantity right here and also the shopping cart quantity up here. So I wanted to be able to add things to the shopping cart, but also increase the quantities down here for each product card itself. I had a disconnect between those two. Sometimes if I did things a certain way, it would have the items in the cart actually iterate one more each time, but the product card would stay the same, and then the opposite would happen depending on how I approached the problem. So I actually fixed that today with 3 separate things that I had to do to actually get it so that the two states were aligned, and I'm going to run through those now. The item cart was actually utilizing the length of the shopping cart array that was being sent to the cart through the nav element. It was using the length of that array for actually generating the number up here. So that was one of the first problems that I had to deal with. At some point I changed it so that the items in that shopping cart array were product data objects, so they would have an ID, they'd have the name, they'd have the quantity, the cost. And I wanted to focus on the quantity instead of just the length of the arrays. So I added the increase quantity in cart function to be utilized for actually increasing that quantity within the object for a specific ID. However, that did not update the cart and my code for that. I was still using .length, so I had to fix that by using reduce over the shopping cart array. So let's go take a look at that in the cart. So that's right here. It's calculating the total of all the product quantities within the cart, and we do that by passing the shopping cart array to reduce, having 2 arguments. One that is total quantity, that is going to start off as 0, and then the actual product object for each object in that array. It's going to go over that array and then return the total quantity plus the product quantity combined as a summation. So at the very end of it, we'll have a total quantity for all the items in the array. That'll be set to this variable called let number items in cart. And then that number of items in cart will be displayed down here in the cart count, which is this little text field right to the bottom right of the cart over here. That helped to actually get this to work up here on the screen in the cart. So it did actually update the true state of the shopping cart, not just the length of number of items in there in the shopping cart. So that was good. The other problem that I had was, again, the product cards were not updating like I wanted them to as well. So the second solution that I had to implement for actually getting the product cards to update successfully was setting the quantity of a product within the product card as a state. So using state up here to set that quantity and have a function for setting that quantity, and then within what was previously called add to cart, which is the or add to cart was this function, but this handle increase quantity, which was the on click event that's called when someone clicks one of these plus buttons, the set quantity is used to increment the quantity up 1, in addition to setting the state within the cart, which was something that I reviewed yesterday with this function here. It was originally called add to cart. So I updated that, and so that did fix things within the product cards and cause some alignment between the cart and the product cards themselves and the quantities that were being displayed. So as we can see, this works. And there's also some logic here, specifically in how I was incrementing the quantities. It's not too different than what I was doing yesterday, so I won't necessarily go into that. The last thing that was causing a problem was when I would click on going to the home page, it would seem like everything was okay because we'd see this item quantity is still 22 up in the cart. But if I'd go back to the shopping page, it's not doing it now because it's fixed, but this would be 0, this would be 0, this would be 0. All the product cards would be at a quantity of 0. And that was because I use this all products data array to actually generate the product cards. And this array and state essentially were originally being implemented up here at the top of the shop component. And so we see that it's utilized here and mapped over to create a product card for each one of the products. But having it set up here, in addition to specifically this logic that I have down here, it was causing these product quantities to be set to 0 every time you navigated away from the page. And it was also adding to the noise of this misalignment between the item cart and the product card. So looking at this logic here, we actually can see that this is where that product quantity being 0 was coming from. And it was because also the product IDs were being set on the initialization of the shop component. And as we can see here, I'm setting unique IDs. I'm not giving defined IDs because I'm not necessarily using a database, and I want to keep it unique, just something that I learned in something else in the Odin Project. And so every time we would visit the shop page, those IDs would update themselves, even though the data wasn't necessarily updating. And this logic down here is looking to see if a product is in the shopping cart that is having the same ID as something that is being mapped over in the all products data array. So when you moved away from the page, the shopping cart IDs would stay the same, but then we go back to the shop and then the IDs would change for the all products data. So then that's why all these things would go to 0, because it was not finding those products in the cart, even though they were, and even though this item cart actually had the correct total quantity there. So that was the third thing that I had to do to actually get alignment between the product cards and that item cart count up here. After that, I took a step back to make sure I was using a test-driven development approach going forward. So I went into my product card test, and I shared with you guys this stuff yesterday of just like making sure that a card component that had different than the default data types was actually producing and updating appropriately. However, today I added these UI-driven changes to the product data, these tests for you doing these specific click events for the incrementer and also for the decrementer, which is the next feature that I worked on after setting up these tests. So I knew what to do for the test that I wanted because I had already built the incrementer. So I made that test up. I just wanted to make sure that the quantity that was default set to 0 for this default product data was rendered, and then taking that rendered object and making sure that it had the appropriate text content of being equal to 1 after this user click event. So we have that increase quantity button. We expect it to be have a class name of quantity adjuster, and then click that quantity button and then check that the product quantity is in the document and also has a value of 1 after being clicked. So that was that initial test, but then I was thinking about the decrementer, so this minus button over here, and how I wanted that to work. So I wanted to make sure that it did not give me negative numbers for product quantity, so I wanted to stop at 0, and I wanted to make sure anything greater than 0, it would still decrement by 1. So I have that here for the making sure it's not going to -1. So it works almost exactly the same way, except we have an additional test here to make sure it's not equal to -1. And down here is the one to make sure it's anything above 1 is going to decrement by 1. And I just have really essentially one main thing there to make sure that if it's starting at quantity 1, then it will go to quantity 0. So I utilize those two tests for the decrementer to actually make that feature within the app. And so going back to the route switch, I created that function by utilizing the increase quantity in cart function as a scaffold. I then made this function down here, and it works fairly similar, except it's a little bit different in that if the product is not in the cart, similar to the logic up here, in that it's checking for if it's in the cart, but if it's not in the cart, then it will return nothing. And then if the product is in the cart and that product quantity is greater than 0 right here, then we'll decrement by 1 for the product quantity for that specific product. I will probably have to put in something here to make sure that I get rid of items that have a quantity of 0, but I haven't gotten to that step yet, so I'll have to do that tomorrow or some other day. So that's this decrease quantity in cart button, which is then passed to the shop component in addition to the shopping cart and all products data and the increased quantity in cart. And then that is going to pass those same things to the product card for those two functions and the shopping cart. And in the product card, we're going to use those two functions, increase quantity in cart and decrease quantity in cart, in their respective handle quantity click buttons down here. So very similar to the handle increase quantity that I reviewed earlier, so I'm not going to go too much into that. Except we do see this, again, this quantity being greater than 0. It's only going to decrement things that are greater than 0, not 0 itself or anything like that. So that was another kind of significant feature that I put in here today. The last couple things had to do with just some simple things. So I had originally a lexicon field up here, a lexicon link that would go to the section on here for samples being displayed on the front page. I took those samples off because they are being displayed within the shop itself. So it was kind of redundant since this is a little bit different project than the landing page. So I took those out, took that link out, and then I utilized the link and routing for this shop up here to also be utilized within these buy buttons. So as a user lands on the page and then reads down this screen, they may lose sight of the top nav bar, but I still want to focus their energy and their time on the site to getting them to the shop. So click on that button, it goes to shop. Click on this button, it goes to the shop as well. So those were just utilizing links and routing to do that. And then I created a bug because I wanted to have this about and testimonials to link to the front page again and then jump to the relevant section. But when we actually click on these, I'm using just straight A elements, nothing React oriented. When I actually click on this, so testimonials is a good example, check out what happens up in the item cart. So it goes to 0. And that's because it's not using routing or links within React to do that. So it's not just re-rendering thing, it's just re-rendering the entire app as if it was going to that URL up here. And as we could see, it doesn't even go to the testimonials page until you get to the page and then click down. So I got to figure out how to do that within React, but that should be straightforward. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time focusing on that because I need to get this item cart to be actually able to be displayed and modified for final checkout by the user. So that'll be where I'll be focusing my efforts going forward. That's all I have for today, guys. So if you like this video, let us know. And if you have questions for me, please comment below. If you'd like to follow us along on our web dev journey, definitely hit subscribe. Check out our daily vlog playlist and our weekly updates on Friday with the combined video. And that's all I have. So I will see you guys tomorrow when Emily and I come together to give you our update at the end of the week. See you guys.